Hi, my name is Rosa Calcagno and welcome to my presentation on social class and inequality, cultural diversity and identity, and gender issues in Australia. In my presentation today, I will start by talking about social class and inequality, move on to cultural diversity and identity, and finish with gender. Social class and inequality. Social class is the organisation of people into groups based on their economic and social status. When there is inequality between the different social classes in one society, social and cultural issues can arise. Traditionally, people of a higher social class have had greater access to a quality education. As a result, they have had the higher level of education and connections to be able to take the better jobs and make better money. Australia has been said to be a meritocratic society in which social advancement is determined by ability and hard work rather than inherited wealth. Looking at Australia as a whole, is this really the case? Let's look at this in terms of Marx's theory of alienation. The theory argues that capitalist economies produce social class hierarchies and create social conflict due to the fact that the social classes have different interests. The working class are alienated from the means of production, meaning that the capitalist class, including the owners of the companies, are able to gain maximum control over their employees. This idea is still relevant in Australia today, as CEOs are often paid several hundred% more than the least well-paid workers in the companies. Meritocracy is used to justify this norm, as they say that anyone can become a CEO. However, often people of a higher socioeconomic status have greater opportunities to gain the tertiary qualifications to do so. By justifying this norm with meritocracy, a blind eye is being given to the social class inequalities, failing to see that due to reasons such as education, culture, and geography, opportunities are not always equal. Ideology in Marxist terms is a configuration of controlling beliefs used by those in power to maintain and reinforce their positions. Schools are ideological state apparatuses as they teach and promote certain ideologies that control populations and allow the power of certain groups to be maintained. For example, according to Bowles and Gintis in 1976, schools produce a compliant workforce with characteristics such as discipline and punctuality, thus promoting the ideals of a capitalist society. In the 1970s, Prime Minister Gough Whitlam recognised that there was inequality amongst the social classes in gaining access to tertiary education, and in 1974, he abolished university fees for students. Although the abolishment of fees only lasted until 1988, university fees have not been required to have been paid up front since, with the introduction of HECS or help debt in 1989. Prime Minister Gough Whitlam stated that we believe that a student's merit rather than a parent's wealth should decide who should benefit from the community's vast financial commitment to tertiary education. Between 1974 and 1988, there was a rise in working class students and women studying in universities. However, the rise in numbers was not dramatic. This is due to the large number of working class students not completing their secondary school education, therefore not being able to continue on to university. This brings us to our schools. Education aims to break social class barriers by giving everyone the opportunity for social advancement. The combination of making school compulsory for students up until the age of 17 and no upfront university fees means that accessing a higher level of education has never been more accessible. However, there are still some inequalities and social class disadvantages that the Australian school system is reproducing. The Gonski Review in 2010 found that there was a link between low levels of academic achievement and educational disadvantage amongst students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and Indigenous backgrounds. This research paved way for new funding arrangements for schooling that aimed to ensure that differences in educational outcomes are not the result of differences in wealth, income, power, or possessions. Through this scheme, additional funding was distributed to schools on a needs basis. An example of a school that has benefited from the Gonski program is St John's Park High School in Western Sydney, New South Wales. Over 80% of their students were from low socioeconomic backgrounds and over 90% from non-English speaking backgrounds. Between 2014 and 2016, the school received approximately $600,000 in Gonski funding, which introduced multi-lic programs for students struggling with English, speech therapy for 80 students per week, occupational therapy, art therapy, and upgrading information technology at the school. The school has reported that literacy and academic achievement has increased due to this funding, and 146 of the 200 Year 12 school leavers in 2016 were given a university offer. Gonski funding was, however, cut by the Turnbull government in 2017, meaning that the thousands of schools that have benefited from this additional funding program are at risk of losing the support programs that have been put in place. As a beginning teacher, I feel that it is important to be aware of the effect that social status and its influencing factors can have on the academic performance of a student. By understanding this, I can use teaching strategies to assist disadvantaged students achieve their academic best. Furthermore, it is important to get involved in the community and campaigns such as I Give a Gonski to help make a change in the needs-based distribution of funds in Australian schools. The next issue I will be discussing in my presentation today is the issue of cultural difference and identity. With Australia being a multicultural country, cultural diversity is all around us. It is evident in the workplace, in the local shopping centres, and especially in our schools. Due to the many customs and traditions that cultures are made up of, it is common for one to feel that a large part of their identity comes from their cultural background. I'll use myself as an example. I'm Australian born to an Australian mother and migrant Italian-Argentinian father. As a result, Argentinian and Italian customs, as well as the Spanish language, have made up a big part of my upbringing and have contributed to who I am today. Due to the fact that Australia is a multicultural country, schools are full of students that come from non-English speaking backgrounds. In fact, approximately 1 in 4 students in public schools in New South Wales and Victoria come from non-English speaking backgrounds. Due to this large number, it is important for schools to offer culturally and linguistically inclusive learning environments accessible to all, including refugees. A culturally inclusive classroom involves a positive interaction with students, such as myself as the teacher communicating my cultural background and making the students aware that I'm excited to learn about their cultural backgrounds too. Discouraging classroom incivilities, for example, responding immediately to any discriminatory behaviour that might take place. Using inclusive language and appropriate modes of address, for example, asking students if they have a nickname or how to pronounce their name properly as well. And encouraging open and honest, respectful class discussion. For example, allowing each student to give their opinion while encouraging students to listen carefully. Schools play a very important role in promoting values of respect for cultural diversity. Therefore, when it comes to racism and racial bullying, schools have a big responsibility to deter such behaviour. Unfortunately, racial bullying still occurs in Australian schools. A publication released in 2017 by the New South Wales Government Education Department on Anti-Racism Education stated that racism in schools adversely affects educational outcomes, confidence and happiness levels of students, the students' own perception of their cultural identity, and student behaviour. This may lead to students seeing schools as an unsafe environment and potentially dropping out. In order to deter such racial bullying in schools, the New South Wales Government requires that every school have an anti-racism contact officer, also known as ARCO, who promotes anti-racism education programs such as Racism No Way in schools, monitors racial behaviour and effectively follows procedures when dealing with complaints. When talking about supporting cultural diversity in schools, the education of languages is a topic that I find myself to be very passionate about. Language programs in schools assist in maintaining community languages as well as introducing students to the languages and cultures of other countries. Unfortunately, unlike many other countries in the world, many students in Australia stop studying a language by the time they have finished Year 7. I myself speak Spanish fluently and have always dreamed of being a Spanish teacher. When applying for my graduate diploma of education, I applied with the specialties of music and Spanish. Although I was accepted based on my undergraduate education, I was told that they could not find me a Spanish practicum placement due to the language not being taught at many schools, so was therefore not able to complete my education degree with a Spanish specialty. Rather than say this in haste, I'm using this as an example to show that both students and teachers may find barriers when seeking to learn or teach a language in Australia. Through my research, I found that there are a number of barriers to language education in Australia. These barriers include Number 1, a lack of government support for languages that are not listed in the Australian Language and Literacy Policy as a priority language, and also for languages that are not considered to be a language that will be of importance to Australia's economical future. Number 2, language programs are often taught by underqualified teachers. For example, a school that I've been associated with had their religious education teacher, who had no prior knowledge of Italian, do a 1-week-long night course in Italian to also become their Italian teacher. But having a teacher that doesn't know a lot about the language can cause students to lose motivation and also lose respect for the teacher themselves. Number 3, a commonly known weak scaling ratio for languages in the New South Wales HSC that I'll now expand on. In New South Wales, HSC marks are scaled based on the whole cohort's performance in other widely taken subjects such as English. Trends have seen a large number of students that study languages in schools are students whose first language was not English. Often this will mean that their results in English are not as high as their results in the language they are studying. The University Admission Centre's report on the scaling of the 2015 Higher School Certificate in New South Wales shows that there is a large difference in the way languages are scaled when compared to other subjects. As you can see in the table, the average raw mark for subjects such as economics and physics scale down only 6 points, while mathematics extension 2 scales up 1.5 points. When looking at languages, the average raw mark for a large number of languages can scale down to up to 25 points, with the average mark of 47.4 for Filipino being scaled down to 24.1. This scaling system is discouraging students from studying a language course as part of their HSC in New South Wales, with many students preferring to choose subjects that will scale them to a better ATAR than study an actual language. In order to change the outlook of language learning in New South Wales and other Australian states and territories, the scaling system for languages in the HSC should be revised. Teachers should hold a standard high level of prior education or knowledge of the language, and all Australian governments should make language learning compulsory until Year 10, not just Victoria. The last topic I will be talking about in my presentation today is gender. Gender can be defined as a socially constructed definition of what it means to be a man or a woman at a certain time and in a certain place. The definition evolves as society's values change, meaning that the concept of gender is not concrete but always subject to change. In terms of gender, a woman is thought to be compassionate, nurturing, which may be due to a female's ability to breastfeed, curvaceous, thanks to celebrities like Marilyn Monroe and more recently Kim Kardashian, and sensitive. Men are thought to be strong and muscular, which is why you might see men killing themselves in the gym to gain bigger muscles. Non-emotional, the breadwinner, based on the fact that traditionally women stay home to look after their children, and being the dominant figure in society. In 2009, Connell presented the concept of gender regimes, a pattern of gender relations characteristic to an organisation. The gender regimes of schools have evolved over the years due to the changing role and definition of gender in terms of a man and a woman. However, some aspects have stayed the same. For example, the majority of leadership roles in schools are held by men, even though there are more women in the education industry. At the independent girls' school I attended throughout my secondary years, they never had a female principal or vice principal. This shows that the view of men being the dominating, powerful figures is still being upheld in our education systems. As a beginning female teacher, I feel that it is important to be informed of the current bias towards male teachers in leadership roles, and it is something that needs to be changed. Gender equality in the workplace is long overdue, and by being informed, we can fight to make a change. There are scholars such as Biddulph and Summers stating that contemporary schools are feminised institutions that are disadvantaging boys. They say this due to the fact that in Australia, girls are outperforming boys academically, and because the majority of teachers are female. This statement has not come without backlash, however, especially considering the fact that boys were achieving higher grades than girls in the 1970s, where the ratio between female and male teachers was even higher. Hattie found that the gender of the teacher does not affect the academic performance or potential of a student. It is instead the effectiveness of the teacher themselves that determines whether a student, either boy or girl, will learn effectively or not. If a student is to learn effectively, the teacher will have good content knowledge, be good at creating interesting lessons, and also relating them to prior lessons and other school subjects. Martin and Marsh further supported this idea by reporting that boys and girls found themselves no more or less motivated or engaged in their classes by a male or female teacher. So why is it that boys are performing lower academically than girls? Academic performance has been associated with being influenced by the student's family, including its socioeconomic status and the level of education the child's parents have completed. Further study should be undertaken to investigate the effect that socioeconomic status and family influence has on the gender of a child and their performance at school, by, for example, looking into whether lower male academic performance is evident in schools where they may have a lower socioeconomic status than girls. Bullying has been found to be most common amongst boys. Marsh et al. Found that boys are more likely to bully others in an attempt to live up to the aggressive or macho characteristics of the male gender that has been created by society. Similarly, if boys do not act macho or if they possess feminine characteristics, they may be more susceptible to being bullied. I'm sure that we have all at least once in our lives heard a child yell to a boy, "He runs like a girl." This type of bullying is directly caused by societal views of gender. Marsh also noted that boys may bully in order to feel dominating, another characteristic of the male gender. Where some boys do not dominate academically, they may feel the need to dominate in the playground. As a beginning teacher, I will aim to take a gender-neutral approach in the classroom and in the playground. By encouraging students to take part in something that may not be representative of their gender, for example girls playing rugby, students are given opportunities that they may not have previously had access to, and this will change the mindset of what boys and girls do to hopefully decrease the opportunity for gender-based bullying.